Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, December 31st, 2024, New Year's Eve. And today we're talking about indigenous agriculture, about farm insurance, and about how I'm quitting farming to become a fisherman. So let's do it. Okay, so I'm not actually quitting farming to become a fisherman, but every time we're at the ocean, I threaten to do exactly that or move the farm near the ocean. I just love the ocean, freezing cold or not. Perhaps it's some sort of deep, ancient relationship I have with the sea from my Frank or Scott or Celt ancestry or whatever European indigenous people we were, but I have an absolute visceral reaction to being around the sea. I love taking runs on the beach. I love the smell of the water. I love seafood and seafood markets. I love watching the kids run into the icy cold water like a bunch of goofs. The ocean just has a feeling of abundance and calm and replenishment. Even though it was like 30 degrees Fahrenheit every day, I took a run every morning that we were there. And on the last morning, it was raining, so no one else was on the beach at sunrise. It was just me and thousands of birds. It was the most gulls I've ever seen in one place, and it made that particular run embarrassingly giddy. And then immediately I felt bummed. It made me think of like early colonial descriptions of the quote unquote New World and how the rivers and streams teemed with fish, and there were birds enough to block out the sun, ducks and geese and swans and all the things, just by the thousands. Albeit in California and the Pacific and not the Atlantic where we were. I think about this from the book Tending the Wild by M. Cat Anderson. Quote, in 1857, the Crescent City Herald reported that a massive school of smelt and sardines piled up a foot deep on the shore of Crescent City and extended 3/4 of a mile seaward. The fish were so numerous, 3 men found it impossible to row a skiff through them, end quote. Anderson's book is full of a ton of quotes and descriptions from the time when Spanish colonists were first coming upon Western America, specifically like California. Like this from William Brewer in 1861, quote, shellfish of innumerable forms, every rock matted with them, stuck in the crevices, clinging to stones, millions of them, end quote. Same in the rivers, ditto the woods, everywhere was packed with food and life. But to think this was because America was just wilderness is flatly inaccurate. This abundance was the direct result of a large-scale indigenous agriculture. The incredible stewardship of America pre-colonization is one of those things that I think about all the time and mourn in some capacity. America and Europe, for that matter, was once rich with life, full of food, plentiful, bountiful. Alive, and not because of the lack of human participation in the environment, but precisely because of the ancient land stewardship techniques of millions of indigenous people. You get glimpses of that, of what it would look like or what it would have looked like sometimes, like those thousands of birds on the beach in the early morning, but also just new species of bugs and birds and snakes that show up on your farm when you're growing ecologically. I know we are not going back to that anytime soon, but I think the greatest failure of our ancestors was their inability to recognize the abundance they stumbled upon as the product of intelligent work, of ecological stewardship, not some simple natural quote-unquote wilderness. They viewed that abundance as a wild, free commodity to be harvested, like gold, instead of a living ecosystem that not only had to be maintained, but could be. And so I don't want that to happen to us. I want us to be able to recognize what true ecological progress would look like, what good ecological stewardship would lead to, rich, diverse, abundant, buggy, birdy, flowery, and aromatic. I often talk about how those 1800s Native Americans were not living off of soils that were operating at 20% organic matter or something outrageous. They were stewarding soils that were closer to 8 or 10% organic matter, depending on where it was. Because once the soil arrives at a certain point, it stops needing to store more organic matter in the soil and starts to store the carbon in other life forms. Microbes, micropredators, then worms, birds, and rodents, larger and larger predators, scavengers, and so on until that thing dies and returns to microbes. Or, as Baudelaire once eloquently put it in the poem Une Charogne, the corpse renders unto life 100 times what it stole from it. But that abundance requires extraordinarily complex, large-scale ecological agriculture, reciprocal agriculture that looks almost nothing like modern farming. I don't have the answers, but I do have a podcast where I can pontificate on this stuff. So, I guess that's a start. Anyway, I guess I'm curious how that makes you feel to think about what the world did look like could look like again, and whether or not that changes anything for you about how you want to live or farm. Is it sad? Optimistic? Anyway, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll talk about perhaps the exact opposite subject, liability insurance, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil is a worker-owned co-op in Cleveland, Ohio, making NOP-compliant living soils for organic growers. Everything from Tilth is compost-based, and they divert around 4,000 tons of food scraps from landfills each year. I have used Tilth Soil for several years now for my plant starts. I love the results. I get consistent germination and consistent growth, plus excellent customer support. It's a lovably nerdy cast of folks who run Tilth. So start your season with excellent germination and strong transplants. Check out Tilth's pre-sale pricing for the 2025 season at tilthsoil.com. That's tilthsoil.com, and click Farmers. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider joining the over 850 people who support it at patreon.com/no-till-growers, and I'll even answer your questions, for better or worse. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Nathan Meadows, which was actually from back in November, so sorry for the delay on this one, Nathan, but they write, quote, I have a follow-up question from the segment on E. coli in onions. What kind of liability insurance should market gardens be carrying? Where can we find coverage? Is FSMA certification or produce best practice training good enough? End quote. Okay, so great questions. Let's tackle them one by one. First, I should preface this by emphasizing that I am not a lawyer or an insurance agent, and you should still consult with local officials and agents. The following is intended as general advice from a fellow farmer. All right. With that caveat out of the way, in terms of what kinds of liability insurance should market gardeners be carrying, organizing as an LLC, limited liability company comes with some protections depending on the state for you personally as an owner. Generally, forming your company as an LLC versus a sole proprietorship is recommended for that reason. You don't want to get personally sued for something through your business and lose the house, for instance, or the car or whatever. That would be no good. And an LLC may be the first line of defense there. So that would be the first thing I would say. Second, if you are going to have people visiting your farm for any reason, such as a farm store or farm tours or barn dances or whatever, there are different kinds of farm liability insurances out there that you can shop around for. Every state is different, so I can't say this one is better than that one or you should get it from this place. Though if you have regional advice there, commenters, or anything to add, please feel free to leave it in the comments section on YouTube. We have an awesome comment section full of smart folks, so it may be worth reading through that for specific recommendations on any of these topics. It's this farm liability insurance that can, so long as you confirm it with the insurer, protect you from lawsuits from making someone sick, for instance, in the case of the E. coli. Depending on the policy, it could also protect from animals getting out and wreaking havoc, or farm dog biting someone. You can get liability insurances that protect you if you run a U-pick, berry patch, or apple orchard, or whatever. There are various forms of employee liability insurances in case volunteers or part-time employees get hurt. In many cases, you may be able to really dial in these policies to protect you against anywhere the public is involved with your production or your food. Some farmers markets may also require farmers market liability insurance, but I would recommend it anyway, even if they don't require it. If you're doing a farmers market, it's important. Like, what if a wayward gust of wind launches your tent at a customer or a structure or something? You obviously don't want to hurt anyone, but like that could happen. So you do not personally want to be on the hook for that. And that's especially true if someone gets hurt and medical expenses are involved. I mean, again, obviously do everything you can to avoid dangerous setups on your farm and at market for that reason, but things do happen. I've been at markets where, 30 or 40 mile per hour wind gusts just kind of up and just kind of pop up. And I've seen tents toppling end over end down the market. That's not great. That's not safe, could be expensive, could be dangerous. Avoid it and protect yourself from any repercussions. Anywhere other people or other people's stuff, like maybe a borrowed tractor or a boarded horse or livestock or whatever, anywhere those things are involved, liability insurance should be considered. Does it suck that we live in such a litigious world that small farmers have to worry about being sued for accidents? Yes. Yes, it does. Just holding on to that full stop for a second because I have nothing to add to it. It just sucks. For finding coverage, check with your local farm insurers. You may be able to get everything from car insurance, general home insurance, and some of these other more nuanced liability insurances from the same place. Now, in terms of FSMA and GAP, FSMA is the Food Safety Modernization Act, and everyone has to abide by it who sells over $25,000 per year worth of produce. There are some exceptions, but generally speaking, it's basically just food safety stuff. GAP, or Good Agricultural Practices, is a volunteer certification, one that you pay for. That is more rigorous than FSMA standards, but is sometimes required by larger retailers like Whole Foods. And although both will help with traceability and obviously food safety, and certainly both demonstrate a care for sanitation, neither is likely to protect you from a lawsuit directly. Though I could imagine how the traceability built into something like GAP would help you prove your innocence and minimize any harm. Anyway, I hope that's helpful, and sorry for the holdup on answering that one, Nathan. Slipped through the cracks. Feel free to chime in if you have any other ideas. And Patreon members, be on the lookout for the January show thread this week, where I will also be taking more of your questions, especially as the season starts to ramp up for us in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm sure lots more questions will come up. Otherwise, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will tackle the age-old question of, should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot? An old lang syne. Be right back. All right, so I've been trying to think of a good way to end the year, a good note to leave 2024 on, and the one that keeps floating to the top of my mind is this. I'm just going to be flat out wrong sometimes. I've been wrong in 2024 about things, I'm sure, and I will be wrong about things in 2025, almost definitely. I will be zealous at times and dogmatic at others, probably even when extolling the virtues of being non-dogmatic. I cannot promise my advice will always be good or helpful to you. I cannot promise I won't let you down. I cannot promise I will avoid talking about soccer, because we all know that ain't happening. There are times when I feel like I've used this platform well so far, and times when I feel like I've wasted it or even maybe abused it. Sometimes I find my words wanting to sway opinions more than share perspective, and although I think there is a place for that, I promise to try to avoid overdoing it and to be aware of it, because I respect that everyone who can make it this far into a nerdy daily farming podcast, I mean, I just did a whole segment on insurance, can form their own opinions about the world or about an issue or about farming. I don't want to be vague about that idea, though. What I mean is that sometimes I just see ideas or comments or concepts taking off that could potentially harm your farm or business, or that may not work, or that need some context, and I feel compelled to step in. But instead of just telling you this is the right way and that is the wrong way, I want to just give you more fodder, more perspective to work with in forming your opinions about this or that agricultural trend or whatever it may be. Other things I can promise headed into 2025 is to continue to humbly welcome your critiques. And although they aren't always fun to read, I'll admit that, I think that they make this show better. I also promise to stay curious and hopefully inspire you to do the same thing. Humility and curiosity to me are the antidotes to so many of our societal ills. We learn in school how to answer problems, but not how to generate questions, and not the value of admitting that we're wrong sometimes. Everybody is wrong sometimes. They should be. It would be wild to live in a world where nobody is wrong. It isn't a thing. I promise humility, and I promise to not always be as corny as I am being in this final segment of the year, while also sometimes just unabashedly being this corny. Lastly, I promise, or maybe I should be using the word resolve, but anyway, I promise to also respect that there are actual people with actual feelings and lives and livelihoods who are listening to this and who are adding the comments, in the same way that you all do a great job of respecting that there's an actual human being behind this show. So thanks to everyone for making the first 3 months of this show such a success and so much fun. I will continue for as long as I can, but it's your support, both in comments and at the Patreon page, that make it possible and keep me having the energy to embark on this wild, challenging project every day. So Happy New Year, everyone. I will not be staying up until midnight, but I applaud those of you who do or who try. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of December, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to... it's our weeklies. Alex and Oliver, Mena, Stacy Moorman, Bill King, Byron Green, Chris Yates, Stephen Smith, and we have a joiner, Sydney Katz. So this is an improv troupe. We like those here. And they are doing a skit about, this one in particular is a bunch of ghosts who get together and they sort of bemoan this idea that, all these, that cell phones have really taken the wind out of their ability to scare people because it's really hard to get their attention because they're, they've got their earbuds in and they're staring at their phone and just walking down the street. And also they're, somewhat relating that to how much a market can shift overnight. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult times for ghosts. Just keep them in your thoughts this new year. All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you in 2025. Bye.